Hey there, Mark Brown. I have never, ever seen you this excited to spend some time with someone. Oh my goodness. Hero worship is nothing. Mark Brown. Oh my gosh.
Well,
Wow.
well, listen, Darren, very quickly, I will not delay. I want to talk to our guest. But for all those who are watching, quickly, a couple of quick disclaimers and caveats. Our guest today is a football commentator, which is soccer in the USA. And you may think, wait, what does football commentary have to do with being a better public speaker? Trust me, you will learn in a couple of minutes when we sit down with the individual who was rated by 90 Min. Now, 90 Min is the world's largest football community, okay? And they have rated him the best football commentator of all time. So, in a minute, you'll get to meet the incomparable Peter Drury. Let's do this, Darren.
All right.
Anyone can give a presentation. Few deliver unforgettable presentations. What's the difference? You're about to find out. Welcome to the Unforgettable Presentations Podcasts with your hosts, world champion speakers and coaches Mark Brown.
Your life tells a story, and there's someone out there who needs to hear it.
And Darren LaCroix.
Stage time, stage time, stage time.
Ready for some powerful presentation ahas? Let's dive right in.
All right, let's welcome Peter Drury. Peter, how are you, sir?
Hi, gents. I'm very, very well, thank you. How are you?
Well, I am just giddy, as you probably know by now, because I just am so thrilled to meet you. And I've been a fan of yours for years. And anybody who watches football in Europe, they know your iconic voice. We don't always get to see you. And Darren and I have been talking about this for the last several days. And I'm so thankful to share you with our listeners and our viewers who are all speakers at different levels of proficiency. But I know you have so much to teach us today, so I'm very thankful. Darren, you're welcome for Peter as well.
And Peter, we've never had a podcast where Mark's wife chimed in already in the comment section.
Wow.
That's special.
Well, she knows I talk to my TV when you're on, and we're so thrilled to have you.
Oh my. Well, welcome, Peter. Just let's dive in. Oh my gosh.
So, Peter, how did it all begin? You're a voice the world knows. If anybody goes to YouTube or search on his name, you'll see him all over the place. How did it all begin for you, Peter?
Well, I guess I've just been very lucky, Mark, really. I did what I suppose every sports-loving little boy and girl all over the world still does. And that is when I was kicking a ball around or wielding a bat of some sort, I used to commentate on myself. We all do that. I guess in the States, people shout their own name and touchdown and all of that sort of stuff. I did that too, but I never really seriously considered that was something that I would do beyond that kind of childlike experience. And to sort of cut to the quick of the story, I went off to university, as people do, and I came out of university and I became a trainee accountant. I wasn't very good at that, and I decided to pack it in and chase a bit of a dream, and since then I've been very, very fortunate.
Wow! So you went to print and then to radio, correct?
Well, I did a fair bit of print. I got my first really big, fortunate break with what I didn't know at the time, but I had been and continues to be actually one of the great sports reporting agencies in London, in Fleet Street, which was, as you may or may not know, at one time the sort of headquarters of all the great national newspapers. And so I did a fair amount of writing, and I loved writing, and I still do. But I suppose I was always having a leaning towards broadcasting, and I got my first job with the BBC locally in Yorkshire in north of England after a couple of years of writing. And I was very lucky when I went there because it was a great patch for covering sport. and the big club up there is Leeds United. Premier League fans will be aware of them. And when I was there, they happened to become the champions of England. And so some of my work became known amongst the big bosses down in London, you know, and so I got a break then too, and continued to sort of build a career with the BBC Radio. And then 7 or 8 years after that, the big commercial network in the UK, ITV, had a sort of an iconic commentator who was coming to the end and announced his retirement, and they came and got me to fill the gap that was left behind. And I've just been lucky so often to be in the right place at the right time.
Well, that's a wonderful story. And you just taught me something important, Peter. You were so iconic on the mic, but you began by writing. And I would suggest to those who are viewing and listening right now that good speakers are good writers.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I do think that in my line of work, and I'm sure yours, there is no substitute for genuinely loving the words that you're using, whether you write them down or speak them. Having an authentic, I don't know, I don't want to sound pretentious here. There's a danger of sounding pretentious if I go on like this, but I think having a genuine feel or relationship with the language you're using is really important. And of course, yes, the written word is absolutely as valid in that regard as the spoken word. And people can talk about the way the two run parallel, and indeed the way they can sometimes pull apart. You would understand too. I'm sure you guys speak a lot about writing a speech or delivering a speech, and maybe writing and delivering are two different things, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but a speech is not well delivered if it sounds too written. You know what I mean?
Amen.
So you write, you may write, but you need to know when you're writing to speak or when you are writing to be read.
That's wise. A speech is not well delivered if it sounds too well written.
I think so. Yeah.
By the way, Peter, I'm not being unkind, but I'm actually taking notes, because one of my jobs is at the end of our broadcast to review some of the gems you will leave with us. So I want to make sure not to leave anything out. And then Darren and I have spent some time. We do teach other speakers about writing, and we say write for the ear, not for the eye.
Yes.
But there's something unique about your style where you seem to be able to do both most adroitly and most deftly. And by the way, we have some fans who are live with us, and please feel free to put a comment in or a question for Peter so we can talk about this. And one of the things, Darren, please, up to you. Go ahead, my friend.
Well, I'd just like to, sir, for people who aren't football fans and don't know of the legend, by the way, Peter, Mark actually has been levitating for the past week. He's so excited that you're here. But I want people to have a taste. What I was so impressed with, I love improv. Comedy's my background. But the way you improvise in the moment and are eloquent. The wordsmithing is amazing. I was blown away. And I have a short video clip that I'd like to play here with your permission, Peter, because I want people to see you in action, especially people who don't know you. So let's go to clip.
And let's go.
And they're Roma have risen from their ruins. Nonetheless, the Greek god in Rome. The unthinkable unfolds before our eyes. This was not meant to happen. This could not happen. This is happening. Barcelona, extraordinarily, 8 minutes from elimination. And Di Francesco does not know where to go. Iniesta does not know where to look. It is a Greek from Mount Olympus who has come to the 7 hills of Rome and pulled off a miracle. Phenomenal! Beyond legend and history. Dzeko, De Rossi with composure from the spot, and then Manolas, the Greek god amongst gods, who came up with a near post flick, etched into the memories of everyone who was here, tearful and otherwise, to behold it.
Wow. Wow. Watching a master work. Oh, I hope everyone saw the genius in that, Mark.
Not every night's like that, Darren.
Well, Peter, for our viewers and listeners, and those who don't know football, it's important to give some context here. That goes back 5 years, 2018, the European Champions League semi-final, leg 2. That's a mouthful for those who don't know football. But these games are played too, home and away. And to give some backstory, Peter, help us to understand the significance of Roma and Barcelona at that time in the Champions League.
Well, I mean, Barcelona are one of the great clubs of European football. And as you rightly say, Mark, these games are played over 2 legs, as we call it. Barcelona had played their first leg and won by 3 clear goals. So that meant that Roma had to play the second game and had to win by 3 goals to go through. There's a further complication around away goals and so on. Don't worry about that. We know that Roma had to win by 3. And given what we knew about Barcelona, who had also the greatest player in the world in Lionel Messi playing, and not just him, they were an outstanding team, that was impossible. It was impossible. And so if I may carry on into the context of how it felt for me, as I turned up for that game, the truth is I was very relaxed. There was another game on that night that was bigger, between 2 English clubs, Liverpool and Manchester City. To me, everybody was watching the other game. I was relaxed. It was lovely. I was in the beautiful city of Rome. Messi was playing. There was nothing to complain about, but there was very little jeopardy in the game. And so my stars aligned that night in the sense that, as you would understand, you do your best work when you are relaxed. So I wasn't tense particularly. I felt as though I had no audience, and I was able just to express myself. So Roma had to score 3 goals, and it was only after they scored the second goal that it's a penny dropped inside of me, and there was a sudden realization that if they did happen to score again, this was going to be a thing. This was the world was going to sort of spin twice as fast on its axis, and they did. And in moments like that, you can only trust your instinct. And mercifully, my instinct was in a good place that night. But also, I owed a lot to the television director, who cut up a number of a sequence of close-ups of the various individuals that enabled me to refer to them and happen to fit with my thought process and so on. And it just came together. I must say also that as I left the stadium that night, because I'm not on social media, I find that healthier for me in all sorts of different ways. But I had no idea that it had particularly impacted. And it was only when somebody rang me a couple of hours later and said, "You do realize what's going on out there, do you?" And I said, "Well, what?" I said, "I know it's a great game." But so I'm always really careful to say, and I really believe that in my game, different perhaps to your game, but in my game, it really isn't about what I do. The commentator is relatively or very, very unimportant. The moment happens, the sporting achievement occurs, whether the commentator is there or not. I'm just a very, very lucky bloke who happens to sit in the stadium with a microphone watching these special moments happen. So I wouldn't want to sort of conflate my contributions that evening with that of Kostas Manolas, who scored what was an historic goal. That was his goal. That was his goal. And so when I came away, my sense was only that I'd been really lucky to be in the stadium for an extraordinary sporting moment. But I can't deny that in the 4 or 5 years since, people have asked me more about that moment than anything else I've ever done, because it was the night it all came together, I suppose.
Well, Peter, I want to sit with this for a while, and football fans will appreciate this. But as speakers, I need to catch a few key lessons from what Peter has just told us. First, I'm going to submit to you, Peter, even though you're known by many as a football poet, I'm going to submit to you you're also a football storyteller. And what you do is difficult and impressive, and here's why. As speakers, we always tell stories. We try to tell personal stories. We want to create images for the audience to see what we're telling them so they can relate and can connect and enjoy the moment. We want to give our audiences experiences. So they must imagine based on our words. Here's why I find you impressive. I'm watching the game. I'm seeing it happen. But your words, your storytelling enhances my experience as a viewer. To me, that's more difficult than someone who can imagine blindly, and forgive the word blindly, but they can't see. They are only hearing the speaker's words. In this case, I'm watching the game, but your words still elevate my experience. And I know you will probably ask this question. Now, Peter, come on. Did you plan any of that? And your answer is?
Mark, I can give you a straight answer to that question. I'm afraid it's not a yes or no answer. It's a bit more nuanced than that. But you must not, you can't, this goes back to writing for speech. You must not, in my view, sorry, there are no rules here, this is only my opinion, but I don't prepare anything that happens between the first whistle and the last whistle of the game. That is to say, don't try and pre-imagine any of the unpredictables. Because if you start writing for a goal that might be scored, what would I say if so-and-so scored a goal right at the end and won the match? Then that goal won't occur quite as you imagined it, you know? And so whilst you might get somewhere close to telling the story, you'll just miss it round the edges. You know what I mean? So nothing from first to last. You know, certainly that goal that we've just seen in Rome, I couldn't possibly have written, because it wouldn't have been a part of my imagination. I couldn't have believed that was going to happen. It would have been a waste of my time. But what I would say is that there are certain things that happen around a football match which you'd be crazy not to prepare for. You know, I appreciate I'm talking to an American audience here, which maybe does things in different ways, but certainly in the English Premier League, you know, we have on television the moment when the teams gather underneath the stand and they're in the tunnel and they're about to walk out and the crowd goes crazy and all of that. I know that's going to happen. You know, I would be stupid not to think, you know, that it's what I call a set piece. You know, it's obvious that that's going to happen. Equally, at the end of the World Cup final, somebody is going to step forward and lift the World Cup, and some dignitary is going to hand it to him. And, you know, that is stuff that you can prepare. But, the bits you can prepare, you need to be very careful that it doesn't sound as though you're sat there reading a script. And my personal trick for that, and others can tell me whether it works or not, is that my handwriting is appalling.
Yes, so there's hope for us all.
It's absolutely terrible. So I scribble it in my terrible handwriting, and that means that I can't just read it. I just see a few clues. I pick out a word or two, and I hope that means that it doesn't sound as though I've got it in clear black and white in front of me and I'm just reading it out. And so I'm sort of pausing and working it out and so on. So the pre-prepared words, if you like, are only sort of 3/4 prepared. They leave space for something that might not happen, for a close-up of someone you might not have anticipated, for just breathing, and the rest of it you have to trust to look after itself, and you know that trusts to instinct. Which isn't to say, by the way, Mark, I don't want to seem disingenuous here or even to hide anything from you. That's not to say that just when I go for a walk the previous afternoon, I might think of a word, and that doesn't become part of a script, but I might scribble a word in the top left-hand corner of my notes and think that word might be handy, or I might have a prompt or two along the way, because there's only so much nonsense that sticks in my head. So, and so those spontaneous moments are spontaneous, but if you watch as much sport as I do, and as so many of us do, there are only so many adjectives to go round. And if you think you've got a fresh one, that's gold. So down it goes. Yeah.
Well, Peter, I have 3 thoughts, and you just put me in a mindset. You mentioned the adjectives to go around. Please, Darren, don't let me forget. I got to go back to that, because there's 3 thoughts here for speakers wanting to be aware of. 1, preparation. Peter, you do prepare before the game. You said between kickoff and the end of the whistle, you can't predict that, but you prepare yourself around it.
Oh,
and there's 2 more things. One is the extemporaneous speaking that takes place during the game. As presenters, there are times we're called upon to be extemporaneous during a Q&A, on a panel. We can't prepare all our remarks. And 3, there is the customization of the remarks. Now, how did you do that? Let me explain. I did some research, Peter. You mentioned Roma and Barcelona played 2 games. First in Barcelona, Catalans, and second in Rome. And the first game, you said when they're in the tunnel, they're going to walk out and you can prepare for them. Here's the customization piece from the Roma-Barca leg 1, when you said, and I quote, "Another kaleidoscopic, cacophonic Catalan carnival." Do you recall saying those words, Peter?
Not specifically.
Okay.
But yeah, I listen. I can imagine I might have said that.
Well, I'm going to drill down on customization here for a reason. Please catch this. Kaleidoscopic, to me, an image of vibrant color. Cacophonic, the sound inside the Camp Nou. Catalan specifically refers to Barcelona and their physical location on the continent. And Carnival speaks to the atmosphere. Now, Linda Marie Miller, one of our friends, is a total fan of rhetorical devices, and she mentioned the anaphora, and of course, the alliteration. You combine that. But every word you use in that 5-word sentence, another kaleidoscopic, cacophonic, Catalan carnival, gives me, the listener, a visual of what's happening at the arena. So my question is, how in the round world do you think of all of that in one phrase?
Well, I guess, Mark, it's kind of you to frame it like that. I guess it is because I love those words, and because one of the challenges of my job, and presumably yours and Darren's, is to find ways of expressing myself, and maybe I'm I don't want to say easily bored, but I do want to say that I get tired of the same, and we watch a lot of sport, and I enjoy attempting to articulate something that's happened before differently from the last time it was articulated. And of course the challenge then for me is that the next time I go to Barcelona, I can't call it kaleidoscopic and cacophonic again. So, and that will probably happen. But I do love that a part of the exercise. I spend many hours, as you rightly say, around the 90 minutes preparing statistics and facts and who scored how many goals and when did they last meet and all of that sort of stuff that you hear from sports commentators. And those are the nuts and bolts of what we do. But my favorite part of the exercise is what are you actually going to say, insofar as you can be ready for that. And so I guess the night before that game at Barcelona, I probably would have sat down with an empty page and thought, what am I going to say as they walk out in the Nou Camp? And that's what I came up with. But I do give that a lot of attention because, as I say, that is a set piece. And I don't get, I'm conscious again, I'm not necessarily talking to an audience for the sport that I principally cover. But we have within it things that we call set pieces. A free kick, the ball is dead, people are in set positions, and you can practice that, you can rehearse that. A penalty kick where the goalkeeper is going to be standing on the line, that the goal is that shape. There are no moving parts. You have that as a sports person to deliver. And so as a broadcaster, there are certain moments when there are no, as it were, moving parts. It is a given. And so to me, there's no excuse for not being absolutely ready, because it is a given.
Well, before Darren takes over, 2 quick thoughts I want everyone to catch. You invested a lot of time to prepare for that moment. You knew you could, and so you did. And the other is, please don't lose this, my friends, the customization. You use the word Catalan, and those who understand Barcelona will know they're a Catalan team. But you talked about a Catalan carnival. So we got the atmosphere, the carnival. We got the kaleidoscope, the visual. We got the cacophonic, the auditory, and the customized for your audience so we know it's Catalan. To me, that is brilliant writing and brilliant delivery. And the lesson for us as speakers is, can we use language that meets the needs of all the senses and not only paints a picture, but delivers an experience? Darren?
I'm wondering how long have you loved words? Because I know Mark is a wordaholic. It seems like the language and the words has that always been part of you, Peter?
Yeah, well, it has, Darren, to be honest. And I've got no sort of qualification to prove it. And I'm not a great reader. People do say to me, you must read books, as though they're going out of fashion. And actually, to my shame, I don't. I'm not especially well read, and I wish I was. I've probably spent too much time watching sport. But from a very, very early age, I did always love words, and my teachers used to say it of me. And listen, let's be clear, that has sometimes been to my detriment. I've been too wordy, too flowery, and
Guilty.
And I guess there'd be people who would say that sometimes I still am, and I would plead guilty to that. I remember having a very strict English teacher once in my teenage years who said, I've just read a full A4 page of your writing, and it's full of words, but it said nothing. And that's absolutely fair. And I used to try and use it as an excuse for getting around a lack of knowledge. And as a teenager, you think you can fool people, and you can't. You think you know everything and you know nothing. I used to write a history essay, and at first, without knowing any of the facts, and think that if I could write 3 pages, I'd get a B. And of course, I got to the end, and the teacher said, "Well, you haven't told me anything here." And so words can be very, very empty if you don't choose them nicely. And I'm being long-winded around answering your question, but the simple answer is yes. Words have been a part of me for forever, but for better and worse.
Well, hopefully you're not full of words, to quote Shakespeare, words full of sound and fury signifying nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Darren, Linda's comment.
Well, it's biblical, isn't it? Clanging cymbals.
Can you write? Linda Marie, a friend of ours, says, "Can you please write a book for speakers entitled A Book of Handy Words? Add excitement to your speaking."
I wish someone else would write it and give it to me.
There you go. You have in your preparation, just watching that clip, and I know that's an extraordinary opportunity. However, you still had to prepare for that. You still had to the Roma, like I
Risen
can't
from their ruins. Roma has risen from their ruins. Manolos, Greek god. No, sorry, go ahead. I know this. It's okay. Big fan.
do you have techniques? Do you have a way that you prepare, a certain amount of time, a certain way you look at, okay, this city's playing this city? What do you come up with for your keywords to?
Well, honestly, that one I really didn't prepare because, you know, as I said to you before, that was a match where what happened was impossible. And so it wasn't worth preparing. And so I guess I grasped at some fairly superficial knowledge that was in there somewhere. As I say, the guy scored the goal. And to start with, I wasn't even sure who scored the goal. When I worked out who it was clear he was Greek. You know, what did I know about him? He was Greek. And of course, you know, the two great sort of ancient cultures are Greek and Roman. And that's kind of all I had to go at. So I went at it. And by the way, you know, you played that clip the last maybe 90 seconds. That has utterly exhausted my complete knowledge of Greek and Roman culture. That's all there was. You know, don't ask me question 2.
But notice though, what impressed me there, Peter, it is probably the most popular clip in the world you've ever done in your career. You've been here 30 years doing this. It is probably the most popular clip in the world. But when you think of Manolas, the Greek god in Rome, you know, who was descended from the 7 hills and pulled up a miracle, you know, just the way you pull in the culture, you tie it all together, and it just seems to have flowed from your lips. How do you even rehearse that? It's a very rhetorical question, but
well, you don't, Mark. You don't. And again, I would say too, and this is not any sort of false modesty. I was helped along the way. If you watch those clips back and turn the sound down, you'll see that there are a sequence of pictures which I followed. So you know, Iniesta, so all of the stuff. Yeah, obviously they didn't necessarily lend themselves to the Greek and Roman thing that I fell upon, and so that was just something that came off the top of my head. But all of the what was it? Di Francesco doesn't know where to go. Iniesta doesn't know where to look. All of that sort of stuff. That was just a sequence of pictures. And by the way, I had no communication with the director. I was literally following the pictures as they came up. But I was in a flow and I had a momentum. And mercifully, it came together. And I would say to you, and again, this is not false modesty. This is just realism, that you know, that happens 1 in a million. You know, if I describe 100 goals, 3 or 4 of them, I mean, not many would be on the scale that this one has happily been for me, but 3 or 4 of them, I might come away and say, oh, I'm really happy with that one. That's gone together and I'm happy with the words. 5 or 6 of them, when I get back in the car after the game, I'm thinking, oh, that wasn't up to much. I could have done that better. I wish, all of that sort of thing. And the other 90 are just another goal. You know, they're just another goal. And so it's really important to understand that that when you hit some sort of utopia, as maybe occurred that night, that doesn't turn you into some linguistic genius forever. It was just the day the planets aligned, or whatever, or I was blessed in some sense. So it's lovely to reflect on that, and I'm not denying myself it, but you know, that was a day when it just fell into my lap, and I was lucky to be in the right state of mind, and I'm sure this does play also into everything that you're doing, and I really appreciate that what you're doing is helping people to speak better publicly, and I do think that preparation is absolutely key, but preparation doesn't necessarily involve writing down the best lines or anything like it. If I was prepared for that moment in Rome, it was because I had a full grasp, just through instinct and being around it, I had a full grasp of the meaning of the night and of the meaning of the moment and of the context. And that was instinctive. It wasn't something that I needed to write down or especially concern myself with. I suppose if I was going to flatter myself at all, I would say I was on top of my subject. So that kind of whatever occurred within the context of my public speaking that night, I was in a position to deal with it. So if I was going to give myself any sort of a big tick, it would be that I suppose I was in a comfortable space where whatever happened, it would be okay. And I suppose you would agree that when you're speaking to an audience of any size in any environment, that's a useful place to be.
You did say you were in a flow. How do you get yourself in a flow? You're doing these games 2-3 a week. How do you get into a state of flow and be up for the moment? I believe every presenter needs to understand this.
Yeah, that's interesting because, again, like everybody, you have days when you feel as though you're in really good, bright form, and days when you don't. Actually, again, this is like being a sports person. They don't always play the game of their lives. Even the greatest have days when it just doesn't work, and again, you would say this about public speaking. Timing really matters. The timing of a sentence, the timing of a word, the moment you take the breath. And a lot of it is quite, and again, I'm in danger of getting overly pretentious here because I don't necessarily aim for this, but a lot of it is quite musical, isn't it? The sort of timbre of a sentence or the way the words fall and so on, and when your timing is in, again, I'm on dangerous territory when I get to American sport, but I guess, when you wield the baseball bat, there are days when you see the ball coming and it's big and large and your timing is great and you belt it 100 miles. And there are days when even if you're the greatest in the world, you just don't connect. And it's the same, I think, with what we do. And so I can start a football match and I can think, I'm sluggish today. And at the back of my mind, I hear myself saying, I hope they don't score yet because I'm not ready for a moment. I'm not ready. And then hopefully you warm up as the day progresses, so that ideally, if there is a big sort of climactic moment, you're ready for it when it comes. But by the way, the danger in my business, and it may be in yours, is that if you get a slightly dull day, if nothing happens and nothing happens and nothing happens, and you reach half time, there's not been a goal, there's not been a moment, and you can fall into a kind of semi-slumber. And then, bosh, right at the end, something happens and it catches you out and you're a bit dozy about it and you don't deal with it in the way you want to. And I suppose if you're speaking at some great gathering of the great and good and you've been sat there for 4 hours thinking, this guy's dull and it's going to be my turn. It's going to be my turn in a minute. The same sort of dangerous thing might come. So there's a lesson there to try and be switched on all of the time. But that's a utopia.
And do you have a process when, games coming up? Do you have a process of what's the Peter preparation process?
Ooh, alliteration, Darren. I'm impressed.
I think, well, listen, the kind of what I call the nuts and bolts preparation is 6 or 8 hours at a desk, just doing all of the statistical stuff. So that is stuff that you just need to do. Those are the basic building blocks. And then I do try to afford myself an hour or two for what I've referred to as the set pieces, to make sure that I get those right. Because as I say, I don't think there's much excuse for getting those wrong. Those should be a given. But then the day of the game is really important to make sure that your head's in the right place. And the most important, this doesn't really refer to what you're dealing with, but the most important thing in sports commentary is to know who they all are, to know, to be able to identify. So actually the hour before the game kicks off, when they're out on the field warming up, I have my binoculars and look at them all and make sure I know which color boots they're wearing so that I can identify two similar guys, one from the other, and all of that sort of stuff. And the last hour of kind of getting into the zone, being absolutely ready and comfortable. It's about, I think, making yourself comfortable. You know, be in a position where you think there's nothing that you can't deal with. And it's very rare that you reach that point, because ultimately what are nerves? Nerves are the supposition that it might go wrong. And we all feel nerves. And we're all, to some extent, driven by fear of failure, you know, by the prospect that it could go wrong. But if you can get that under control, and then find yourself that sort of comfort bubble of preparedness, there's that inner knowledge that I know as much about this subject as I reasonably can, and it's likely that I know more than most of my audience, because it's my job to, so I should.
Sure.
Then that is a position of comfort which gives you your best chance to relax, and relaxation gives you your best chance to do it well, I think.
Wow. Go ahead, Darren, before you get to the
question on, you talked about getting in your headspace, and then that 1 hour before. One of the things we teach speakers is don't eat anything at like an hour before, unless it's water, tea, to warm your throat. But if your body is processing food, that's going to zap your energy when it's game time. So what does Peter do to kind of get yourself in the physical and mental state?
I've failed the exam already, Darren. I'm afraid I eat sweets.
No pies.
Working,
so
energy. You get energy for that.
Yeah.
Sweet.
But
Like me bouncing off the wall.
I take your point. I guess I think your advice would be very good to someone maybe who's new to public speaking, because we all do know what it's like to have a stomach that's churning through nerves and terror and so on, and having a heavy pie in your in your stomach when it's churning probably isn't the best thing to do. I take that. Equally, I would say, and maybe again we differ here, because I basically, once I'm sat on the television gantry at a major stadium, that's me stuck for 2 hours. So the worst thing that can happen to me is that I suddenly feel hungry halfway through the second half, and I'm lacking energy, and I need to make sure I can top up, because I panic. If I get to that stage and there's 25 minutes of the game still to play, and I can feel my stomach rumbling and I can feel myself weakening, I hate that. So if anything, I probably slightly overeat before a game, because I'm worried. And I would also say, without wanting to go too far down this road, that once I'm on the gantry, I can't get away to do what we all have to do once in a while. Yeah. And so you don't want to fill up with too many cups of tea.
Yeah. Just enough to warm your throat. Well, Peter, if you permit me, I'm going to do something we have never, ever done on a podcast before. You said earlier, there are only so many adjectives you can use to describe a play. So for the first time, anytime in the last 3 years, we're going to play a game where Peter is our only contestant. And here's the name of the game. The name of the game is Adjective Alternatives.
Oh, wow.
It's Adjectives Alternatives. So I'm going to give you a phrase and give me a Peter Drury rendition of a similar phrase from a football game context. Oh, that was a good pass.
Oh, what a beautiful delivery.
Ah, okay, excellent.
Yeah.
That was a really poor referee decision.
I'm not sure he's got that one right.
Oh, excellent. Good. And by the way, you can use nouns, phrases, or other adjectives. Okay. That was solid defending.
That's a fantastically robust challenge.
Robust. I love that. Okay. Oh, what a bad goalkeeping error.
Oh.
Give me a noun. Give me a noun for this one. Give me a noun. What's a bad goalkeeping error? What do you call that?
You see, I'm only prevaricating here, Mark, because I one of the things I was also taught was not to use a word that you would use in a real context. So I might have been tempted to say that's a catastrophe, but then there would be people who would say to me, a catastrophe is a landslide that kills 20 people. And it's really interesting. The language of sport so often borders, because it's a word of it's an area of hyperbole. And so if I say that's a disaster, well, sorry, no, a disaster, I'm afraid, is a guy with a gun in a Californian primary school. That's a disaster.
Brilliant.
That's a catastrophe. Brilliant. And so you've got to be really careful. And actually, we talk about people, don't we? We talk about people shooting. We talk about them going into battle. We talk about them, and understand that for most people, that's fine, because they understand there is a clear distinction between sporting language and the language, if you like, of the real world. The words are the same, but the difference is clear. But there are people out there who you have to be wary of and who you have to respect, you know, because people who have seen what a real disaster is, what a real war is, find those words difficult. So actually, a goalkeeper letting the ball through his legs for a terrible goal, I tend to, having now bought myself a minute to answer your question, that was
brilliant, love that.
I tend to, in those moments, rather than say that's terrible for the goalkeeper, I tend to find the humanity in the moment and say, poor guy, what an awful moment for the goalkeeper. I tend to think of his mother. And
really?
Think, how is she feeling now? You know, he didn't do it on purpose. And it's not really a disaster. It's a goal in a game. You know, we're playing a game here. And so I tend to get away from the terribleness of the moment. Partly because I'm an old softy and I don't like, I just think, I think poor guy. And I say, oh, what an awful moment. He wants the ground to open up and swallow him.
There you go. That's it.
Yeah.
I've heard people say that's a howler before. Okay, come on more real quickly. That was a subpar performance.
Yeah. Yeah. They may feel they've let themselves down here.
Very good. Very good. Okay. It's a smart play.
Oh, there's lots for that. Those little one-liners, that's sweet. You know, that, yeah. Oh, tasty. I like, that's delicious. You know, that sort of thing.
That now, let's see, I don't know of any Americans. I've heard you say that's a delicious ball. Yeah. And I think you mentioned somebody had a powerful strike last week, and I think you called it a bullet and a half or something. You didn't say bullet, but it was like a thunderbolt and a half. You added a half to it. Like, wow, that was a great strike. Okay. He played that ball nicely.
Yeah. That is a sublime connection.
You think of this, the deft touch with panache, a sublime connection. I mean, and they seem to flow from your lips almost spontaneously. Can we practice finding adjective alternatives that are not pretentious?
I think so, because honestly, again, I don't want to sound as though I'm bigging myself up, but I think it is. I think it is only practice. It is only practice, and doing game after game after game, or speech after speech after speech. And in my case, genuinely, I do it because otherwise I become bored with myself. I get bored anyway of the sound of my own voice. I don't particularly enjoy hearing myself back because I'm bored of me. And to alleviate the boredom of myself, I need to say something different. And, you know, there are certain, obviously a goal is the moment. Those are the moments that are remembered. But there are functional moments within a football match, hundreds of them, where the defender just kicks the ball away. And there are, you know, there are only so many ways of articulating. He's cleared it. It's gone. He's got rid of it. It's, you know, and I'm not pretending that I succeed every week or indeed any given week in necessarily finding a new way to say it. But when I do, mentally, I think, oh, that was nice. I've said something different for a change.
Well, here's my last. I'm going to let Darren take over, but here's my last question for you. And to those who are watching and listening, this speaks to a lesson Darren taught based upon the line, there's no such thing as a practice speech. Here's the context. It is Barcelona against Roma in 2018. And in the UK, Liverpool and Man City is the bigger game. and the concept of showing up big. I heard you say in an interview that you didn't think anybody was listening, but you still came up and gave it everything you had in the moment. You didn't think it was going to be a big deal. Here's a lesson that I learned from you. The concept is show up big every time and give 100%. What do you say to our speakers who are been done the same talk over and over again for the last 8 years? What would you say to them as advice with that concept in mind?
Do you know what, Mark? I learned the same lesson that night.
Well, tell us about
because,
it.
Yeah, because there would have been a temptation, if you like, to bring my B game, because that's how it felt, actually, going to that game, that I was going to the B game. And I got lucky that night. We don't need to go into all that again. But it showed me that anything can happen anytime, and wouldn't you regret it if you had a night when suddenly, when you thought you were the sideshow, you had the opportunity to be right in the heart of the big time, and you let it slip away. And I think that is a really good moment. And those of us who broadcast sport, we all have those nights or those days. And I'm sure many of your speakers can identify this, when you think, I've not got the big gig tonight, someone else has. And maybe there's a little bit of professional jealousy. Maybe, maybe you're just not feeling great about it. But in sport, we say, you don't know where the story's going to be today. You don't know. You don't know that it's not going to happen on your patch. It might seem improbable. There might be a 3% chance in the morning that by the evening it's happened for you. But that chance does exist, and you would really regret it if you weren't ready.
And real quickly, my last comment is this. I hope you all catch this. Peter just said, I'm going to do the B game. I'm going to be okay. And 2 minutes of that B game has become the most recognized bit of commentary in the world, which means for you and me, as Darren says, there's no such thing as a practice speech. Give 100% every time, show up big. Darren, thank you, Peter.
And as we start winding it down, Peter, how do you pick yourself up after you, let's say, had a bad game? Because speakers have bad speeches. We look at you as the legend, and we're like, the legend. He never messes up.
Yeah. Well, I can assure you I do, Darren. And you're right. And actually, funnily enough, this is one that comes with years as well. Not so long ago, I could really beat myself up and feel miserable for days and days if I got something wrong, or I felt I was being criticized fairly or unfairly. And both occur, by the way. You've got to be able to accept that people will criticize you, and they might be right. And when you're young, you tend to be defensive and say, how dare they say that about me, because you're trying to make your way. And actually, I reflect now on some of the criticism I've received, and they're absolutely right. So I would say, be prepared to take on the fair criticism, but be prepared to be robust in the face of unfair criticism, because it's unfair. You know when you've delivered and it's fine, but equally, when you maybe haven't. And I think it's good to be self-critical. It's good to listen to the people you trust. Don't listen to the noise. Forget the noise. Listen to the people you trust, and let them tell you. And don't be too hard on yourself. We're human. We are human, and we get it wrong. All of us get it wrong. Tom Brady gets it wrong. Lionel Messi gets it wrong. They all get it wrong. They lose the ball. They get sacked. And if you are doing something live, if you are doing something where there is no take two, then once in a while you're going to get it wrong. And if you are going to speak publicly, scripted or unscripted, for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, 2 hours, somewhere in the middle of that hour, you're going to say something that you wish you hadn't. You're going to stumble over something. That's going to happen. And there's no point being cruel to yourself about that. It's just a part of the human condition. And that's it, really. That's it. You were brave enough to be the one who stood up. And, so be proud of that. Yeah.
And my final question as Mark starts gathering his notes, just to recap the wisdom you've dropped here. I'm going to bring it back to your world. I appreciate you being with us and helping inspire from a different perspective. Love that you're a wordsmith. It's been beautiful watching Mark out of his mind this week with excitement to have you here. Amen, says Andrea, his wife.
Yeah, she knows how crazy I am about Peter Drury. I'm a big fan, Peter. I'm a big fan.
So let's say, Peter, someone new to your industry who wants to be a legendary broadcaster sits down with you to have coffee. What advice would you give them?
It's, first of all, if they wanted to be a legendary broadcaster, I would say don't do it, because I think if you set out to do it just because you want to be well known, you're missing the point, honestly. And insofar as I have some sort of D-list notoriety, I would say that is that's the aspect of my job that I enjoy the least. I much prefer anonymity. And if you just want to be well known for the sake of it, fame for fame's sake is no fun, and ignore it. Remain yourself, humble, authentic, and do it because you love the sport and you love the words. Honestly, don't. We live in an age of kind of plastic fame, of reality television and all of this thing where young people, I'm afraid, are lured into fame for fame's sake. And I really find it so unhealthy. So do the job because you want to love doing the job. Be authentic. Don't do it because you're pretending to be somebody else or you're following in somebody's footsteps. Do it for your own good reasons. But setting out to be a legend, whatever that is setting out on a journey that almost nobody ever reaches the end of, and is setting yourself up for disappointment. And I really don't want that to be a negative message. It's really not. The positivity of the message is that just enjoy it, because it's a wonderful thing to do. Yeah.
Peter, really quickly, that reminds us, we have, speakers who enter the Toastmasters Peace Contest every year. They want to be the world champion. We have people who send us emails, I will be the next world champion. And their focus is on that trophy, which we were blessed enough to win a gazillion years ago. But we always tell them, deliver your message to the audience and let the trophy follow. So I really appreciate your advice. Darren?
Bam. And Peter, how would people find you? I know you said early on you're not into social media. Do you have a website, anything? Or
no, I don't do any of that stuff, Darren.
Good for you.
Yeah, I really don't. I consider myself very lucky that I managed to get established before social media hit the world. I won't bore you. I won't preach on my feelings on social media because it's not least because it's an argument I've already lost. I understand that. And I also understand that social media has an important part in the world these days. So you just have to accept that I'm a dinosaur.
Well, I am thankful that I got hold of you through some other means, and I count myself blessed beyond measure for this time we have spent. Darren?
So Mark Brown, what do we have for keepers?
There's so much. He talked about chasing your dream if you really believe in it. He said you must love the words you use. A speech is not well delivered if it sounds too well written. You do your best work when you are relaxed. And there is no excuse for not being prepared. You just need to do your preparation. Anticipate set pieces for successful auditory language opportunities. Preparation is the key, and get a full grasp of the context and the meaning of the moment. I like this. Stay on top of your subject. Do the research. Remember, timing matters because speaking can be musical. Be honest, there are days you don't connect, but state of mind always matters. Know your audience and your playing field, and be very careful and respectful with the language that you use. Practice, 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 because you don't know what's going to happen. Be prepared to face criticism and be self-critical, but listen to the people you trust and do it because you love it. Darren, you got a few yourself?
You nailed it. Peter, any final thoughts for our listeners? Thank you so much.
Listen, I've learned a lot from this, so I thank you two. Honestly, what an interesting conversation. And I'm very lucky that all I do is shout footballers' names, and I get invited onto to a cerebral podcast like this that talks about really important stuff. So I consider myself immensely blessed as well. So thank you very much.
Well, I am thankful to you, Peter Drury, rated by 90 Min as the best football commentator of all time. Honored to make your acquaintance, and I thank you for serving us. Darren, take us home.
All right. Well, hey, thanks again for being here. Join us next week. We never know who's going to show up. Mark Brown, thank you for reaching out. And it was great to see you like a high school kid, all excited. It was beautiful. So, Peter, sincerely, thank you for your time. Thank you for doing what you do and being great at what you do, and seriously being an inspiration for all. So even Andrea Brown says, well done.
My bride. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, guys. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I'll see you all next week. Join us for another edition of Unforgettable Presentations.
Hey there, this is Darren LaCroix. Thanks for checking out this podcast episode on YouTube. If you want all of them, not every one is on YouTube, check out your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss an episode. Keep being a sponge so you can be unforgettable.
Check out StagetimeUniversity.com, where good presenters become unforgettable.